Hey guys, I just want to welcome you. First session of probably about 14, 15 sessions on the throne room. In this thing, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a journey through Revelation chapter 4 and Revelation chapter 5, and we're going to look at the throne room of God as we take the rest of the throne room visions like Isaiah 6, Ezekiel 1, Daniel 7, and Exodus 24. And we're going to take all the throne room visions and scriptures and we're going to look at them together. And so I've been kind of thinking about doing something like this because I've been doing a lot of study in the book of Revelation for the past a year and a half now. And this is just kind of a way of compiling my thoughts together and kind of doing like a teaching series like this. And so, but not only in the last year and a half, the throne room has been like almost an obsession for me in the last 11 years of my life. I mean, because the throne room of God, it's the place where He dwells. It's the place where He receives worship, the worship of the saints and the worship of the angels. This is the place where He rules and reigns over absolutely everything. And this is the place that we're going to look at in this session here, where we're invited into. This is where we go to. This is where our worship ascends. Yea, this is where we go to. This is the place where we go into this place in worship and in fellowship and prayer and meditation, that we're not just hanging out here in some mysterious way. Our spirit is being escorted into that very throne room and coming right before His throne. And so guys, as we look at the throne room and we look at Revelation 4 and Revelation chapter 5, this isn't just something to tickle our intellects. This is a real reality that we're talking about. We could talk about the things that are happening in some other place. And that's a reality. And just like we could talk about some other location, we're talking about another location in a very real place called the throne room. Now, the first session here is what I'm titling The Invitation, because I want to lay a foundation here before we go into talking about all the different aspects about the throne room, like God's throne, or the 24 elders, or the creatures in the sea of glass, and the seven spirits of God like torches of fire. I want to lay a foundation here because, like I said, God is inviting us, me, you, every one of us. He's inviting us to come into His throne room. And today, in this session, I want to lay a foundation for us that gives us boldness and confidence to enter into His throne. Because, guys, I don't really care what anyone says to me. Like, hey, Stephen, you can come up into God's throne. Or like, what? Okay, whatever, right? But to understand how firmly established this is in the New Testament, how massive of a theme it is. Guys, this gives us confidence. And this is what I want you to have, I want you to have confidence beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have access into the throne room of God, into the immediate presence of God, whenever you would please. And that is your inheritance as a believer. And so, just starting it off in Revelation chapter 4. Revelation 4, verse 1. John says, "After this I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet," and that's Jesus' voice, it said, "Come up here and I will show you things that must soon take place after this." Now, for the longest time, I always thought that this was a call or an invitation to the Apostle John. Okay, a unique thing for John himself, because here's the thing: when you read through the scriptures and things that Jesus did or called to the apostles, sometimes we like to apply that to every believer. But when Jesus gave unique authority to the apostles to cast out demons, to heal the sick, cleanse the leper or whatever, right? That was for the apostles. That wasn't for the common believer. That was unique for the apostles. And there are many times where Jesus speaks of something or gives something unique to the apostolic ministry that is not given to the common believer. And I thought this was one of those things. But what we're gonna see here, because of the surrounding context of Revelation chapter 4:1, this was a call and an invitation that was given to the entire church of Asia. And we're gonna look at this. Because here's the thing. This door that John sees open in heaven, This door was described earlier in the previous chapter of Revelation chapter 3. And if we look here in Revelation chapter 3, and let's look specifically chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. And this is the letter to the church of Philadelphia. He says, who opens and no one shuts, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. Okay, now the door that's open here. Okay, now this has a twofold interpretation. Okay, for one, he says, "I have set before you an open door that no one is able to shut." I open, and no one closes. I close, and no one opens. Okay, now it's really clear here. The interpretation here, for one, is he's giving them a door of open influence throughout the city of Philadelphia. Now that is very clear. He's giving them open, an opening for influence. He shuts, and what he shuts, no one can open. But what he opens, guys, have confidence. I'm giving you an opportunity for the gospel to go forth. So that's one. But secondary, and this is just as true. And this is understood by commentators, theologians, conservative, charismatic, throughout the whole spectrum. This is the very same door that John refers to in Revelation chapter 4 that he sees open. I mean, for one, there's an open door in Revelation chapter 3. And then we come to Revelation chapter 4, we see an open door in heaven. Guys, the invitation of the door in Revelation chapter 1 was the same invitation that was given to the entire church of Philadelphia. Okay, but not only this, but when we come to the end of Revelation chapter 3 and we read of Jesus' last letter to the seven churches, or to the last church of the seven churches, which is Laodicea, he says, Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. Okay, now, it's a bit different here because, for one, he says this is a door that is closed, and so he's knocking at the door. But when we look here, a little bit more detail, he says, if anyone hears my voice, okay, if anyone hears my voice, now the voice of invitation, to open the door. Okay, so two things are required here for the church of Laodicea: to hear his voice of invitation, okay, and then second, to respond and to go through the door, okay? Now, this is Revelation 3:20, okay? 2 verses later comes Revelation 4:1. In Revelation 4:1, John says, the first voice which I heard speaking to me, I heard again like a trumpet. So again, he hears a voice, Revelation 3:20. If anyone hears my voice, John hears his voice, and then he sees an open door, and then John goes through it. It's the direct parallel. Revelation 3:20 and Revelation 4:1 is identical in its language. And what is happening is John is saying, not what John is saying, what Jesus is saying, he lays out to the church of Philadelphia and to the church of Laodicea, I have set before you an open door and an invitation to come through this door. And then what happens is Revelation 4:1, they see the very reality that the church, both individually and corporately, is being called up into. John goes through the open door, and then he articulates and describes the reality that's behind that door. The throne room of God and the direct, immediate presence of God for every believer. Now, when we're looking at Revelation chapter 3, 7 and 8, and 3:20, and connecting that with Revelation 4:1. Now again, that is a very conservative interpretation of that. That's not a charismatic interpretation, okay? That is widely accepted by many theologians and commentators. Again, charismatic, conservative, or whatever. Beloved, this is a reality that God is wanting us to grab a hold of and get it locked in our spirit. That He has given us access into His throne room, into heaven itself, not in the age to come, but right here, right now, in your very living room, you can close your eyes and go into that place. Okay, now, and this isn't just seen in the book of Revelation. This is clearly established throughout the New Testament in the writings of Paul, but especially in the book of Hebrews, which we're going to look at here. Now, in Hebrews, the writer, he starts off in Hebrews chapter 4, and he talks about this rest. Now, the Hebrews chapter 4 rest, which is recorded in verse 1 through 11 of Hebrews 4, it's a very confusing thing going on, because the writer says, we have in the past entered the rest. We presently are in the rest, and yet we still have to strive to enter into the rest, the age to come. All right, it's just so confusing. But the thing is, the writer, he continually says, enter the rest, enter. The word enter appears in Hebrews chapter 4, and then 2 references in chapter 3. I think it's 11 times the word enter appears. Okay, and that's important because we're going to come back to that. Now, so it's fairly confusing about what the rest is. But then he comes to the end of chapter 4, and he says this statement: let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we might receive mercy and find grace in time of need. So he goes all throughout Hebrews 4. He says, enter the rest. And then he says, let us come with confidence to the throne of grace. And so he concludes then that the rest is coming into the immediate heavenly presence of the Father, coming right before the throne. Okay, I love what William Lane says about this passage here in Hebrews 4:16. He says, the force of the present tense of the Greek implies that let us come again and again. Okay, and again and again. This isn't something that we come to just like, one time in our life when we have some dramatic spiritual encounter. This is to be a common practice for every believer, coming right into the presence of God, first for fellowship and second for time of need. Okay, first to enjoy the presence of God and just to have communion with Him, and second, to bring our issues and our problems in our life before Him. The writer of Hebrews, he fleshes this out, this whole theme of rest and coming before the throne of God. He fleshes this out all throughout the rest of the book. Okay, when we come to Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19 through 20, he says, we have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf. Okay, now like I said, in Hebrews chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, the word enter appears 11 times. Okay, I'm sorry, that's including the 2 references of entering into the rest in Hebrews chapter 3. Enter the rest. Okay, now after Hebrews chapter 4, the word enter appears 5 times, and it always is in the context of entering into the holy place, or entering into heaven, or Jesus entering into heaven. Okay, and so it has the same context throughout the book, throughout the later parts of the book of Hebrews, and this is the first time after the rest. He says, "We have this as a sure and a steadfast anchor, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain." Okay, now what is the curtain here? Now the curtain is referred to again later in Hebrews chapter 9 verse 3, which is the curtain that separated the holy place from the holy of holies in the tabernacle. Okay, so he says that we have a hope that enters behind the curtain. Okay, that curtain which the writer later says that the high priest could enter into the Holy of Holies once a year. Okay, guys, He has eliminated that completely. And he says, we have this presently, and we could even say commonly, to enter behind the curtain where Christ has gone on our behalf. Guys, we don't have to be a select individual like in the nation of Israel to enter into this awesome presence one singular time a year. But guys, the veil has been torn, and we now have access to enter behind the veil. Now he goes on, he doesn't just stop there, okay? He says something really profound. He says, where Christ has gone on our behalf as a forerunner. Okay, now you have to ask the question, where's Christ gone? Now the answer is given for us in Hebrews chapter 9 verse 24. Christ has entered, and again, the word enter. Now this is, this is referring back to the entering the rest in Hebrews chapter 4. Christ has entered not into holy places made with hands. Okay, now that's referring to the earthly tabernacle, which is copies of the true things, but into heaven itself. You guys catch that? Christ has not entered into holy places made by human hands. He hasn't gone through the curtain into the holy place in the earthly tabernacle or temple. But he has gone into heaven itself. Now let's look back at Hebrews chapter 6. He says, we have confidence and a sure hope to enter in to the inner place through the curtain where Christ has gone as our forerunner. Beloved, Christ has gone through, he has ascended into the heavenly throne room. And according to Hebrews chapter 6, 19-20, we have followed him there. Guys, we don't enter into an earthly tabernacle now. We enter into the true heavenly tabernacle where Christ has gone as our forerunner on our behalf. And guys, just like just like what I said in Hebrews chapter 4 verse 16, the tense is in the present. Let us come again and again. This invitation is given for us whenever we would please. This isn't to be some unique thing or some rare experience in our lives. We are to enter into this as a sure hope through the curtain into heaven itself whenever we would desire to. This is the inheritance we have as believers. Okay. Now, the writer of Hebrews, he goes on, and then he just kind of takes everything everything in Hebrews 4, in Hebrews 6, okay, in Hebrews 9, and he just kind of brings it all together in Hebrews 10, verse 19, and he says this, therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter, again, enter, he's referring back to Hebrews chapter 4, okay, we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus, by a new and a living way through the curtain, which is his flesh. We have confidence right here, right now, as you're sitting there watching this video. We have confidence. You have confidence to close your eyes and to enter into that place by the blood of Christ, by a new and a living way. I mean, guys, if you're just watching this right now, just close your eyes right now. And just forget about everything here. Forget about all the theological implications and of Hebrews chapter, the whole book of Hebrews here, and how, oh man, I got all these cool Bible verses now. Close your eyes right now and go there. So he comes and he kind of brings together chapter 4, chapter 6, chapter 9, and in chapter 10. Kind of brings it all together, okay? And then he comes to chapter 12 of the book of Hebrews, okay? And then he comes to his final conclusion of this theme that he began in chapter 4 of the rest. He comes to his crescendo of it all, okay? And he just takes everything, just blows it off the ceiling, and he just makes statements that are so mind-boggling here. Okay? Let me just read here. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 18 through 24. For we have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire, and darkness, and gloom, and a tempest, and a sound of a trumpet, and a voice, whose words made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the innumerable angels in festival gathering, to the assembly of the firstborn, who are enrolled in heaven, and to God, the judge of all, the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkling of the blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Okay, now this is the crescendo. Okay, he's developed chapter 4, chapter 6, chapter 9, chapter 10. Now he comes to chapter 12, and this is it. Okay, he just compiles it all together, and this is the conclusion of this theme that he's been laying out. And he says here, we have not come. Okay, verses 18 through 21. He says, we have not come. And then he goes out and he describes the experience of the people of Israel at Sinai in Exodus 19. Okay, he goes and he describes. He says, we have not come to a blazing fire, darkness and gloom and tempest. He kind of describes the activities that was happening when God came down on Mount Sinai in Exodus 19. Okay, now in quoting Exodus 19 here, okay, this was by far this is the most dramatic experience and manifestation of the God's glory that has ever happened historically. Okay, the people of Israel just came out of Egypt at this time from their captivity. Okay, they're brought to Mount Sinai, and at this time there would have been about 2 to 3 million people. Okay, God comes down on a mountain and he openly displays his glory before 2 to 3 million people. You just gotta think about that. That's astonishing. And he reveals his glory visibly to the eye, hearably to the ear, intangibly that could be touched. And before 2 to 3 million people, he openly displays his splendor and his majesty. And they all fall down, and it says here that they begged that God would not speak to them again because it was so terrifying and so awesome. In quoting and making reference to Exodus 19 and Mount Sinai, the writer of Hebrews isn't wanting to glorify Sinai. Okay, if we could say that. What he's wanting to do is he's wanting to overshadow Sinai, the experience that took place there. Again, now this is the greatest experience or the greatest open display of God's glory that has ever taken place. And the writer is wanting to overshadow it. Yeah, I would even say that he's wanting to embarrass it because he's trying to say something else has come. Something greater has come. Mount Sinai was awesome, but something far superior has come. He says, but you have come to Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. Wow. Okay, so verse 18 he says, you have not come, to Mount Zion. Verse 22, but you have come to Mount Zion. We haven't come to an earthly mountain, but guys, we have come to a heavenly mountain. We have come to Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, the very heavenly city where God dwells. And beloved, this is the profound thing here is in Exodus 19, in Exodus 19, 12 through 13, there were limits that were set up. Okay, though it was an open display of God's glory, there were limits and boundaries set up around the mountain. The people could only go so far, and Moses was the only one who actually went up to the mountain itself and had fellowship with God himself. There were profound limitations at Mount Sinai. Guys, there are zero limitations now. God, through Christ, has so wrapped us in his righteousness that is not our own, that has been imputed and given to us as a gift through Christ, that he has removed all limits, and we can come not into an earthly tabernacle, but we can come into heaven itself. In Hebrews 4:16, to come right before the throne of grace. Okay, now I want to just end off this session here with coming back to Revelation chapter 3 and Revelation chapter 4, where we began. Okay, and I want to give some application here. Okay, application and encouragement, I guess. Now, the seven churches, or the church in general, we could say, at the time of Revelation, or time Revelation was written around 90 AD, massive persecution was taking place in the church. Okay, trials and tribulations that we as North American people have no comprehension of whatsoever. Okay, and what Jesus is wanting to do, as he gives this invitation to come through the open door, again, to the church both individually and corporately, he's wanting them to come up. And just as he said to John, I want to show you the things that must soon take place. He's wanting the church to come up and see the things that are to come in the future, but not only just to see the things that are to take place, but the things that are taking place right now in their lives. Okay, the church is standing there at a street level. Okay, they got a street level view and perspective of what's going on. They see death, they see trials, they see beatings, imprisonments, and everything, right? And God is saying, I want to give you a higher vision than a street level. I want to give you a high level vision. I want you to come up and see things and have a different perspective than just looking at things from, if we say, horizontal or street level. I want you to come up and see things from my perspective. Okay, not only the things that are going to take place, but to see things from my vision and get a different perspective about what's going on. In the midst of the persecution, when everything is chaotic, come and take a look from my throne, get my perspective, and see what's going on from my view, my vantage point. Come up and see. And come up and see not just with the church in general, but what's happening, what I'm doing in your own life. Okay, you're seeing this and this and this happening. Come up and get a higher vantage point, and see what I'm doing. So for one, he wants to show them the things that are going to take place in the future, but also the things that are taking place here and now in the midst of their persecution. The last thing I want to draw on here is in Revelation chapter 3. In verse 7 and 8, he said this open door is given to the church of Philadelphia. Okay? And it's also given in Revelation 3:20 to the church of Laodicea. The church of Philadelphia was one of the two churches out of all seven that had no rebuke. Okay? All they had was encouragement and blessing and promises. The church of Laodicea had only rebuke. They had no encouragement. Jesus defined them as the lukewarm church, and that's what they're known as, is the lukewarm church. Throughout history, that's how they've been known. So you have Philadelphia, the greatest of the churches, and you have Laodicea, the least of the churches. Now, what's the implication here? The implication is this: the greatest of the believers enter through the open door. The righteous, the most righteous of believers, they enter through. The most faithful, they enter through. And beloved, the Laodicean Christians, they enter through. Okay? And this is the profound thing of the church of Laodicea in Revelation 3:20. Jesus gives them the invitation to come through the door as the very means to enter out of their lukewarm life. Okay? We think, we're coming into God's Word, we got to clean up our lives and, make everything look good and everything, get the sin out of our lives. And, well, for sure, that's true in a lot of ways. But guys, the lukewarm church is called in their lukewarm life to come through the door because in coming through the door is the very means by which they will be healed of their lukewarm lives. And I want to encourage you guys, if you are living in a lukewarm life right now, the answer is to hear the voice. Hear the invitation through the scriptures. The invitation in the book of Hebrews, Revelation 3, in Colossians 3, Ephesians 2. Hear the voice, hear the call, hear the invitation, and go through. And come into Revelation chapter 4, and behold the gemstone God, the God who's shining like a jasper and burning like a sardius stone. Behold that God, and look at him through the lens of the scriptures, and look at him and meditate upon him and talk to him and have fellowship and fall down and worship before him. And guys, when you do that, it's just the old hymn, things on the earth will grow strangely dim. Guys, when we get swallowed up into the glory and the splendor of the man Christ Jesus, sin just looks disgusting and lame to us. And so I want to encourage you guys, if you're in that place of a lukewarm life, break through it by entering through the open door and come in Hebrews 4:6 to that throne of grace, because guys, it's a gracious throne. It's a throne where God is accepting and wanting you to come. Come in your time of need to find grace. And beloved, in Revelation 7 and 8, Jesus says, I have set before you a door that no man can shut. I open, no man can. What I open, no man can shut, and what I shut, no man opens. Beloved, He has set before us an open door, us corporately and you personally. He has set before you an open door. No demon can shut that door, no angel, no man, yea, no sin can shut that door. And that is evidently seen in the letter to the church of Laodicea. No man and no sin can shut that door. But the only thing that will shut that door is in Revelation 3:20. The only thing that will shut that door, it's not the lukewarm life, but it's the unwillingness to enter through the open door. And so, beloved, this is the call today, guys. This is the invitation, not from Stephen. This is the invitation that has been given throughout the ages and throughout church history. Come. Hear the voice in the scriptures saying, come up here. I want to show you things that will soon take place.